Good evening, everyone. My name is Drace Ryder, and I'm the Vice President of the Boys and Girls Club of the Pikes Peak region. I want to thank each of you for taking the time to be part of the conversation and being at the table this evening. Welcome back to all of you that have been with us over the months, and welcome to anyone that is new this evening. I'd like to say thank you to our funding partner, USAA, for making this possible and their commitment to advancing racial equity. Tonight, our format's going to look just a little bit different. Regina's going to share a little bit more about this shortly. But before I get started, I'd like to take a moment to introduce a couple of people. Great pleasure. I introduce Dr. Regina Lewis. She is well known as a consulting partner, international speaker, virtual moderator, and CEO of Regina Speaking LLC. Dr. Lewis's proven specialty is leadership, professional excellence, cultural inclusion, entrepreneurship, executive coaching, strategic development, and executive public speaking coaching. Regina holds a doctorate in educational leadership, research and policy, Master of Arts of Communication, Bachelor of Arts in Communication, and a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology. Regina's work in the area of diversity and inclusion has become an award-winning program. With all of that, I'd like to introduce Dr. Regina Lewis to go over a few housekeeping rules.
Absolutely. Good evening, everyone. I'm so glad that you're here. I'm looking around and just about everybody's camera is on. I think we got it now. I mean, we have really come a long way, and we've been able to use this platform in amazing ways to bring us all together. So I really do appreciate it. It is my honor to introduce you, or reintroduce for many of you, our speakers from the second quarter of the Conversations That Count. I want to begin with Shirley Martinez. Shirley Martinez, her presentation was How to Explain Racism to Our Youth. Shirley is going to be talking a little bit, and just as a reminder, when we go into the breakout rooms, we're going to take a deeper dive as to how do all of these topics that you've been listening to really connect with equity, diversity, and inclusion. So Shirley.
Thank you, Dr. Lewis. Again, my name is Shirley Martinez, and I actually am the Director for Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion for the Pikes Peak Library District. And I'm on various boards throughout El Paso County. Again, my topic was how to explain racism to our youth. And just pretty simply, with the current climate and societal issues within the United States and the world as a whole, parents, caregivers may be wondering, how should they have that talk with their kids? And exactly when should that talk happen? And so I did just a presentation on the awareness of what should be talked about, the effects on our youth if we don't talk to them. Also, I discussed in that presentation why the talk should happen, and then how to have that talk, because depending on the age of the child will depend on how you have that discussion and what is actually going on in your life at this time. And then I gave some information about some ideas of tools that have been used for assessments and assumptions during that presentation. And then I ended up with options that you could use and some ways forward. So I'd really love to align that with EDI, and that's Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, and how that's working where we are today.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Shirley. And we were asking everyone to come with questions. We want to hear from everybody, from the youngest to the most seasoned in this session. We want you to ask the questions. So if you did not come with a question, start thinking about it as you're listening to a summation of what these presentations are. So when you go into the breakout room, that it becomes really interactive. So Stephen, I'm going to be looking at you to ask some questions too. It'll be exciting. So our next speaker is Dr. Rhonda Williams. So Dr. Williams, her title was Someone Like Me. Rhonda.
So my topic was an activity-based intervention that we often use in education, but it was about that stereotype and what we look at in regards to stereotype and that rigid preconceived notion that we have about stereotypes, and how we can look at them differently, and what our social identities are and how we have been stereotyped, but also looking at that stereotype threat. What is the implications of that stereotype, and how does that impact us educationally, athletically? What happens to us when somebody stereotypes us and we're worried about it, because we all do that, and maybe how to look at it differently, and owning what is part of us, but understanding what stereotypes mean and how they impact us. And by the way, I'm a professor emerita, just newly retired in May from the University of Colorado, Colorado Springs. And I've been teaching counseling and undergrad classes in human services for 20 years. I also spent 25 years in public education as a school counselor and as a teacher. So lots of years in education, and I'm excited to be retired, but I love this topic, and it's something I've been doing for 20 years. So thank you for inviting me. I am anxious to talk to all of you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Rhonda. You know, what I really loved about these conversations was that it was in a non-threatening environment, conversations that were presented by experts in their field that have come to you to be able to share with you, not just the information that they have, but tools that you would actually be able to use at any age, at any level. And so this is what makes all of this work so exciting. So our last presenter, but definitely not least presenter, is Hettie Meyers. And Hettie's title was, "What Do Unearned Advantages Look Like?" Hettie.
It's great to be back with everybody tonight. My name is Hettie Meyers, and most of my background is work in higher education, where I get to explore all the different aspects of sociology, and that's the area that I'm most frequently seen teaching and talking about. So we delved into the concept of what privilege looks like and what unearned privilege looks like and how that comes about. We talked about a question that was, I asked everybody to kind of think about something that you wouldn't necessarily know just by looking at me. And we went down that path, and people shared lots of interesting things, and we got to know each other a little bit. And some of those things were things we don't think about and that help us have a one-up for somebody or don't have that same one-up. And then we took that virtual privilege walk and explored lots of things that lead us to advantages or disadvantages as individuals. And hopefully we can explore that a little bit more tonight.
Wow, thank you so much. I'm excited. I hope that all of you are, as we delve deeper into this tonight. And then when we all come back, this will give us an opportunity to talk about what's next. Wow, that was amazing to be able to sit and have conversations. And so I'd like to just take just a couple of seconds to give each speaker like a minute to be able to highlight some of the things that were discussed in your group, and then I'm going to close it out. So let's go ahead and start with Shirley.
All right. I'm going to bullet mine so I can like really get through it. So some of the questions were, some of the answers were that racism, we need to be looking at it as a bitter truth, and that it's tough. Also, we need to have these different conversations, and that civil rights we need more people that are doing more civil rights to be able to help with this. As parents, having those tough conversations, but with social media, that's sort of like kicking it at the next level, because now we need to talk more to our kids and understand them better. Some of the youth talked about taking a look at us, look at them and understanding when they need someone to talk to them, and then letting them come to you and being ready for those conversations. And they know about joking and everything, and it's up to them to try to make some of those changes. I also heard from someone that said that he's been friends with some people of color for 30 years, but they never really talked about it. And that he thought that the racism, but there really wasn't a lot of racism until all these things started coming out. So it's really about understanding when you need to talk, how you need to talk, and listening to your kids.
Thank you so much. Rhonda, let's go to you.
So it was just fun to have these conversations about stereotypes, how people perceive other people. It's something that we all do, but that getting past the stereotype and understanding the individual. And some of the people did such an amazing job of identifying, here's how I'm stereotyped, but here's what I am not. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a defensive approach, although it feels like we have to justify ourselves. And I thought that was a powerful statement. But on the other hand, it also gives us empowerment that we can say, here's how I'm breaking that stereotype, and you haven't even talked to me about it. So let's have those conversations. Find out more about me. I can find out more about you. So that's key to everything we learn about stereotypes, about stereotype threat.
That's fantastic. Thank you. And so Hettie, you.
Well, we had some really challenging questions that were good questions to ask and really get the dialogue started. And talking about race, is it different for everyone? Is it the same? And talking about those things that come up as sort of that concept of glass ceiling, and how do you break through it when you maybe are on the outside looking in, so to speak. Also, this concept and the idea of, if you have the ability, do you give other people opportunities? And really taking that time to think and listen to others when they're expressing to you in the best way that they can, and how do you give them opportunities and make way for other people? And taking a hard look at the assumptions that people make about each other, but also that the assumptions that people have made about you, and how do you change those assumptions moving forward? So it was great to hear everybody, especially some of the younger people, really engage in that conversation.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. So, as we have these conversations, it's like, okay, so what do we do with all this information? Especially when it comes to equity, diversity, and inclusion, there are some things that can be done. So when we started talking about someone like me, and that really was talking about stereotypes and understanding that we need to get to know one another. Think about what you see in social media. And so to get rid of some of that, the stereotyping, one of the things that you can actually do is educate yourself and spend time doing that. Because when you start to educate yourself, that's not just seeing what you see in social media, it's actually questioning what you see in social media. How could this look differently? Ask somebody who is represented in that social media and ask them, is this accurate? And realize that their answer is just their answer, that other people are going to see it differently. You want to meet new people that are different from you, but don't just meet people that are different, engage with them, find out more about them, build relationships of mutual respect so that they start to know who you are, and you get to know who they are, to the point that you can actually ask each other really deep questions without the other person being offended by it. So that's really important that we do that, because then once you get to know another person, the next time that there's a stereotype, you'll be able to speak up and say, you know what? That can't be true, because a stereotype is saying that everybody that looks like that, acts like that, or has that is just like that. And you'll be able to say, no, because I know somebody who isn't. Be self-aware. Be aware of what you're thinking, your reactions. So when you see a certain person or you hear something about a person, just stop and think for a moment internally, how do I feel about that? What is that feeling that's going on the inside? Does this feel strange? Or and then ask yourself why. And then get the facts. So that's another one, getting the facts. Now, when you get the facts, you can't go to just one source, because that source is going to tell you the story one way. So you have to pull facts from other places. Where do you get these facts from? Well, you can get them from people. You can go to different websites such as ASALH, the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. They're going to give you sources and resources that are firsthand. They're going to, you can go to the Library of Congress, where it's going to be factually accurate information. You can go to Native American websites. You can go to Latino websites. You can go to disability websites. Learn the language. You want to be able to speak about people and spaces the most appropriate way. For instance, we don't want to use the word minority, because there's the opposite of majority is minority. And that's the opposite between less than and more than. So we want to be careful on how we identify individuals. So that's going to be really important. The other one is when we were talking about what to do, how do we understand, what does unearned advantages actually look like? And so unearned advantages, you know, we learned about that in the groups, you know, exactly what that is. But we have to understand this, that we all have unearned advantages. It's what happens with those unearned advantages. So if you have an advantage, that means that on the opposite side of that, someone has a disadvantage. And you have to see, how is this affecting everyone? Is this something that you could personally change? So there's a couple of things that I want to say about that. For all, you can't choose to give up privilege. You can't. Privilege is by definition an unearned advantage, and you cannot choose to not have it. It's something in our society. So privilege maintains itself through silence and denial. And so I'm reading directly from, you know, so much of this research. So it says here, so while you cannot get rid of your privilege, you can acknowledge it. When we force privilege into view and discuss it openly, we encourage or engage in solidarity with those who do not share in certain privileges with us. So when we say engage in solidarity, that means being solid, coming together. So it outlines a couple of things. When engaging with the media, keep in mind that privilege exists and it's real. See if you can identify it while watching television, listening to the news, or playing video games. Another one, point out instances in which members of groups other than your own are being hampered by their exclusion from privilege. Don't be afraid to make a statement, write a letter, post a blog, get into a discussion, or create a dialogue. If you benefit from privilege of any kind, you will undoubtedly someday be addressed about it. Acknowledge your privilege when it is pointed out to you, and take that opportunity to learn something new about privilege. And then lastly, privilege will never go away until the system in our society that causes discrimination goes away. So the last one is, we talked about how to explain racism to our youth. And so there's a couple of things that you could actually do. First of all, peer pressure. You know, we have peer pressure that's around us that causes us sometimes to be racist against another group that has a different skin tone. So race is talking about skin color. And so don't be sucked into that peer pressure. When you feel like that's happening, then that's when you go and talk to someone, talk to an adult, talk to a friend, talk to someone who you trust that you can have that conversation with. Another is that you've got to know your rights. You've got to know your rights about being treated unfair or even being bullied. And so when these things happen, you got to find out, is this part of racism? And that's a question that you can also ask. Look and see, what are the principals? What are the teachers? What are the leaders? What are your parents doing about it? We can talk to our youth about racism at any age, but it's really about your responsibility behind having that conversation. Are you presenting it in a way that's going to create more racism? Or are you speaking about it in a way that's going to invite togetherness and understanding and what they can actually do about it? We have to provide tools for that to take place. So it's really something that we have to be able to be responsible for. And then lastly, report it. Go and talk to someone. Talk to your parents. Talk to your friends. Contact one of us. I mean, now you have what I would call part of your diversity success entourage that you can actually have these conversations with. You can reach out to us at any time. It doesn't end when these conversations end. It continues from here forward. So we're friends of the Boys and Girls Club, and we're bringing our expertise to you. So you have an open channel for that. So I want to thank all of you for giving us an opportunity to present to all of you. So thank you so much. So I'm going to pass it to Drace.
Thank you, Regina. I just want to take a moment to thank all of our presenters. So thank you, Regina. Thank you, Ms. Martinez. Thank you, Ms. Meyers. And thank you, Dr. Williams. We so appreciate your expertise and your time, and for you guys coming back for another round. It's so important for us to have these conversations as a club and as a community. So thank you, guys. Before we close, I'd like to share about our Q4 competition and prize.